There's a kind of moment sometimes when you have to sort of tip all the information out of one side of your head to receive the next amount of information. And I think we might be tipping Ira's information out for some time to come. Anyway, with that, I'm on to keywords, and Kristian is straight to you.
Yes, well, hello dear friends and colleagues. It's a pleasure to be here talking to you again. And well, as requested, a few words about what I do within the field of music. And let's put it this way, it's 16:38 now. Within the last 17 hours I've been doing 3 forms of my 4 main activities. During those 17 hours I played a gig of 4 sets in an Irish pub last night. So I'm a guitarist and a freelance musician. Then I went home and had 3 hours of sleep. I went to teach to the Pop and Jazz Conservatory for around 6 hours. And then, now I'm here talking to you because I am writing my doctoral thesis under the kind supervision of Esa and Alfonso. And so all that in this short time, so I can guarantee that no matter how boring my presentation will be, I'm sure that I will be more tired than you are going to be anyway. So, and additionally, I also organize and I'm the artistic director of the Pop Jazz Summer Camp, which is actually the foundation of the Pop and Jazz Conservatory. The camp was founded in 1970 and the conservatory, or as a music school in 1972. And you will, I'm sure most of you visit that school tomorrow, the whole day. Am I right? Yes? Okay, good. So that's what I do, and now I'd like to move on and rather talk about my subject and not myself. The student's correct keywords. Integration of a student-oriented approach and expert knowledge in teaching popular music. So that's that, and that is the main subject of my thesis, which is under construction, and also it was the main subject of my master's thesis some years ago, 2008 actually, to be exact. So, what the heck are we talking about here? Well, student-oriented pedagogics, I'm sure you kind of get the same way, but anyway, taking into consideration the student's wish, individual interest, background, personal goals, and subjective experiences concerning music. Well, fair enough. Expert knowledge. Well, what I mean with expert knowledge is the skills that the teacher as a professional musician possesses, right? So, for instance, my expert knowledge, the guitar and rock, blues, metal music, which I am specialized in. Now, the main question here, how can these two be integrated instead of being in conflict? Can they complement each other? How can they actually benefit from each other? Now, I'm sure you wonder, why is he talking about rubbish like this? Well, why is this an important question? I think it is a very important question. That's why I have chosen it. Because traditionally, at least in Finland, the teaching of popular music has heavily relied on expert knowledge. So I am actually very grateful for the teaching I have got here. Some of my old teachers that present, but of course we always have to develop stuff, and I thought I benefited from the studies, but I think there were a lot, or I don't think, I know there were a lot of students who didn't. And the school system at the Pop and Jazz Conservatory traditionally was very much like kind of a, well, I've used the word force feeding, so kind of like myself being a rock and blues and metal oriented player, I thought it was like kind of a twisted situation that everybody had to play jazz in tests and fusion. Why? Because there is like major 13 and sharp 11 chords, so it's more complicated and more 7, 8 meters and odd meters, whereas fifth chords and 4/4 beats, like, no, that's easy. And I always thought, like, oh, come on, the blues, you won't get harder music than that. In a way, of course. Now, in a way, yes. And And so this intro is kind of non-scientific now, but as a background for why I chose this subject. Well, what is the problem with excessive focusing on expert knowledge? And based on my experiences, like for instance, a friend of mine who we studied with, Aleksi Laipo, for instance, who you might, some of you know, is making a very brilliant career internationally now for maybe 15 years, something with a band called Children of Bodom. He was kind of put down at the school because he failed a test because he wasn't a jazzer. So he got the criticism, oh yeah, you play nice heavy metal music, but if you really want to make it in music, you should play jazz and fusion. And they were right, of course, in a way, but you know what I mean. So anyway, the student's potential may not be discovered if we focus too much on expert knowledge. Now, some thoughts here, and we'll take a look at this more in detail. But of course, if we don't have the expert knowledge, then is the teaching going to be very reliable? Not really, if the teacher isn't a very good expert, a good musician. And how will the student find something new if everything comes from the student? Now, this is of course quite harsh, but still, the pros and cons of expert knowledge. Well then, the pros and cons of a student-oriented approach. Well, one thought, since music is a form of self-expression, then how could it not be taught in a student-oriented way? If the student wants to find his or her personal and creative potential, the way that this person is the most musical. And especially, unlike the traditional classical music, for instance, classical violin or piano, where there are strict traditions that is proven to work, maybe, then, for instance, with electric guitar or something like that doesn't exist. It's a tradition that has been maintained by and created by self-taught musicians. They create so many different styles. How could we say that you should play technically like so and so? So it's very clear that a student-oriented approach, especially in teaching popular music, is very needed. And also the concept of internal motivation, which I'm sure you all are all familiar with. Like a concept of Deci, makes you want to learn because of the learning itself and because of the subject itself, and not to make good grades, for instance, or something like that. Well, some misunderstandings, and still this is kind of a non-scientific intro, but as a background, like what people say about what I think is misunderstanding what student-oriented teaching is. Like, first, is it ineffective? What if the students don't have to do anything anymore? If it's just an easy way out for them, because I think that's all rubbish. Yes. Well, now, why I wanted to talk about this subject here with you today, since I was informed that this is about music analysis. The role of music analysis in solving this very problem, the core of that, I think, is that when the teaching focuses on musical phenomena instead of repertoire or certain traditions, then that is pretty much the key. For instance, if you have an E minor chord, is an E minor triad bound to any genre? The answer is of course not. Or a Dorian mode. It's if we call that a phenomenon. This is what I mean with that phenomenon. Does it belong to a specific genre? Of course not. Now, I first thought about playing some examples to you about where Dorian, for instance, is used. But I think you get the idea anyway, so maybe we have more time to talk and discuss and so forth if we don't actually listen to them. But there was like some Miles Davis, So What, Dorian, yes, Carlos Santana, Dorian, an example of Joe Satriani, like hard rock guitar shredding, so in a Dorian key. For instance, like So this is the point. If you are supposed to teach a Dorian scale and that's usage, why should it be like in this and this genre? It could be anywhere. So that's the distinction, what I mean with phenomenon and repertoire. Anyway, the integration. Now we are getting onward. A metaphor that I have used to illustrate the idea is something we are all familiar with, and that I think illustrates, or my point is to try to illustrate how this interaction between the student and the teacher works in a creative way, and how these two poles are integrated. A Google search. If we have the right keyword and we have a working computer, which is has a working search engine, we can find almost anything, and we get a lot of results, and then we get the next links from the pages that we visit, and that's like if we have a wrong keyword, it's we won't find the things that we want, right? It won't work, or if the computer doesn't work, or the search engine is working, and this is what I mean. So beginning from the top. The correct keyword, this is the point now, the music that the student is emotionally connected to. And I think I stress, we are later on looking at why I stress the fact that the emotional connection is the key here. That's the correct keyword of that student. The search engine is kind of like the teacher who receives the correct keyword. Like, what do you want to play? What do you listen to? I started out, when I started teaching 15 years ago and being kind of not believing in the traditional system that my school had, I started doing everything differently because I didn't believe in those tests, and I just asked my students, like, what do you want to learn? And so for instance, when a kid said like, well, I like Metallica, well, that's the correct keyword, Metallica, for that, and I, being the search engine, or the Google, I received that keyword. The internet being the teacher's expertise, my knowledge of, okay, Metallica, it relates to some blues-based riffs, the use of Aeolian modes at least, some guitar-wise fast down-picking, whatever, influenced by Black Sabbath, influenced by Led Zeppelin, by Motorhead, and all that. So I said, okay, well, Metallica, yes, well, let's take a look at those. And having in mind what skills are needed, again, what phenomena are needed. The search result being exactly this, like, what does this person need to know, and what are the skills this person needs to acquire to get to his or her individual goal. A web page being a metaphor of a set of teaching material, for instance, the needed techniques, skills course, and then finally links, proceeding to other related teaching materials in an associative and not a predestinated order. So as it is with surfing in the internet, things are connected anyhow, and the order is really can be very random and still get the right results. For instance, a kid who comes with a Metallica t-shirt, and not forcing him to play blues because everybody has to start with the blues, which I think is bollocks anyway, because, for instance, okay, Metallica influenced by Black Sabbath, influenced by Led Zeppelin, or at the same time doing as Led Zeppelin, influenced by the blues. At the course of a very long time, you do get the same influences and the same input and the same phenomena, but the order of where it's done, I think, has to be dictated by the correct keyword of the student, and not the predestinated order, which is a curriculum, as was the previous method. Well, some interpretations. Now I have two big questions, like, here, what is the meaning of all this, and then finally, what can we do with this? Now, to some scientific stuff. How can we interpret what's going on there? On a subconscious, on a deeper emotional level, the individual relationship with music reflects the early attachment relationship. In a psychoanalytic theory, the mother-child relationship. And so, for instance, Donald Wood's Winnicott, a British psychoanalyst, used this term transitional object, i.e. music provides experience of safety and shelter, so represents the early mother. For instance, when a child gets the feeling of care and consolidation of a toy, and so which kind of represents on a subliminal way the mother. Music can be an object like this as well, or it can be also a container. A theory of Wilfred Bion. Emotions that are hard to deal with are stored in the music, making life easier. For instance, aggressivity and heavy metal. From a distance and projected into the music, it is there. As a self-object, Heinz Kohut's term, i.e. parts of the individual's personality is being projected to the music and serves as a mirror. And finally, another Winnicott term, this true self and false self, which is kind of like the false self syndrome that Winnicott talked about, is that the person kind of starts to believe that this is what I want, even though it's just a mask of what is being expected, and kind of loses touch with what the true will is. And that false self syndrome was exactly the key of the old school system, and the old curriculum was that everybody was forced into the same format. Well, since this is the case, and if we look from these perspectives that I just presented, which are of course only one way to look at it, but that's the point of view that I chose for this, thus it is no wonder why student-oriented material has the deepest effect. And what I mean, the deepest effect, I mean that it's not only about what is the most efficient way of learning and teaching, what gets the best results. That of course is also true, that okay, if we teach music with what is familiar to the student, then it's easier. That's kind of a cognitive psychology point of view. But from that psychodynamic or psychoanalytical point of view, or the point of view of emotions, the feeling, it also has that deeper meaning, and it is important for the student's well-being and development as a human being in general, and not only the results. Another Freudian term, a curriculum can also be, of course, seen as a superego constellation. I'm sure you are all familiar with the concept of the superego. So, for instance, the one curriculum and the way to use that we had, I think, was like representing a punishing father, the limiting superego. As you know, superego kind of like as a restriction that we have inherited from our early childhood. Whereas where we are moving now, and in our school, and being very student-oriented, we are now actually more on the side of allowing superego, something that provides possibilities to the student, not saying that you have to do this and this and this, but you can do that, and from that you can move on to that and that and that. And that it represents, in a subliminal way, a loving, caring father that gives support. And finally, what can we do with this? You might ask, like, now, so what? Well, more of that actually you will hear in the next presentation from my dear friend and good colleague Mika Säily, of what is going on in our school right now. And I won't steal his show too much, but so on two levels I will anyway have this. Well, the last time I was talking rubbish to you earlier this year, I was talking about my research on groove, which I teach very much. And as an example of micro level, what we can do is, groove can be taught by using timing skills, rhythmic fine-tuning, well, those are skills that definitely can be taught. Control of time feel, laid back on top of the beat, ahead of the beat playing, not going into detail of this now, but they are phenomena that we can actually examine and we can pass on to the student, and they can be practiced. Or phrasing, straight, slightly swinging, or swinging phrasing. I think these are, now you might have different opinions, and that's all right with you, but but in my opinion, those are our central aspects of what a groove is. And we are teaching popular music. We can definitely see them as rhythmic phenomena, which may then be applied to any material that the student wants to learn. So we are using expert knowledge with teaching these skills, but where they are used, that's up to the student, really, and how they are used. So that's the student-oriented approach right there. On a bigger level, the new curriculum that Mika will tell you about, we are focusing way more on student-oriented teaching than we used to, and the students are now concentrating on their strengths and interests and learning effectively in a creative process. So I think we definitely are improving on this level. So both in the day-to-day teaching, as was this groove example, this works, and it's an ongoing process, and definitely it is an ongoing process on a larger level, and the level of institutions, which is going through major changes right now, changes for the better, I think. And with this, I say thank you.
Perfect timing, so we've got time just eating into the next break. If anybody's got questions or comments?
Yes, please.
Thanks for the presentation.
You're welcome.
It seems like a healthy approach, starting point, because apparently your research comes out from the actual practice.
From the actual practice, yes.
So in a way you're doing like teacher research.
Yes, in a way.
So I'm wondering, like, you use some of the concepts that are used in educational sciences, but to what degree are you actually like using the theories and concepts?
Well,
there, because
yes.
I was wondering about how does this psychoanalytic
Well,
approach?
of course, that's always a choice of points of view, and of course also since this limited 20 minutes presentation cannot include it, and then I have to answer your question by saying that, for instance, in terms of education and pedagogics, the concepts of constructivism, that is very central to this. So yes, but that's kind of, I think, self-evident because it's just because it is a term that is explained in other ways here. But you're right, that is definitely the one.
Yeah, so you're actually using the
yes.
educational theories like
Sorry?
so you're actually using like say essentially your issues like it's a sort of form of pedagogical paradox.
Yes.
So so you are actually using things like communities of learners and familiar with like Musicology's work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. More questions or comments?
Just like to comment,
Yes.
I think this is very interesting, and because
Thank
you deal with the problem that us aging scholars have in popular music. because
Really? Yeah.
I'm frankly less and less in touch with current popular music, and young people, our students at Salford University,
Yes.
they think popular music is for the young.
Yes.
And
Yes.
in a way they're right. But that's not all. That's not the only popular music.
Well,
so
obviously,
this
yeah.
is very useful to think in terms of focusing first on what they want to do.
Absolutely.
Particularly when it comes to how do you play, how do you teach people how to play.
Yes. As a starting point, absolutely. Yes.
It really is, and there's still a slight problem when you have to teach them the more academic, theoretical things. Sometimes there's resistance to that. but I think it is finding the correct material that they can identify with.
Identify with, that's the right word.
Yeah, it really is a case of identification. And so
Absolutely.
The onus is on us aging people to remain in touch with the interest of the youth of today.
Yes, exactly. I think you're exactly right, and I think in my daily job, I think that's really a benefit for myself, because hearing from my students what they are actually listening to currently and what's out there right now, it keeps me going.
That's right. You know.
So I keep learning actually.
Yeah, exactly. It's a two-way street.
Yes, it's a two-way street. That's a good way to put it. Yes, you're exactly right. Yes, please.
I'm familiar with Lucy Green's How Popular Musicians Learn, this book. It's an excellent study on the methods of popular music learning. Are you familiar?
I must admit, I don't think so. Yeah. Yes.
And, one of her...
I will write that down when...
Yes,
yes.
I'll give you the exact title.
Yes, please.
But one of her ideas is that the basic learning method, or the basic way to learn for popular musicians is like master learner, not like we do in the classroom where we have a teacher and we teach and we learn. So, what is your opinion on that? Are you trying to apply this type of approach in your teaching?
Well, I think personally, where I started out, I think I thought like I would never want to be a teacher originally. Really, I thought, and when I started having students, I thought I'm just another musician, and that's another younger musician, and I'm just passing on, like telling it, okay, I did it this way, I practiced like this, and what do you want to learn? Like talking to another player, really, instead of seeing myself as an authority. Yes, exactly. And I think that's pretty much what there's two players meeting and
sharing.
Yes, and sharing information. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I think you're right. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Thanks very much. Esther's let me know that I was lying to you, and we're not going to have a break now, so I'm sorry to disappoint you. And that's because we're going to have a break after Mika's entertaining talk.
Thank you.